So hi everybody, today is Wednesday, March 6th. I am Aaron Sigbeard. You are at the Kubernetes Infra K8s Infra working group. You're all being publicly recorded. You're going to be posted to YouTube, and you all get to be, that way you can watch yourselves follow the Kubernetes code of conduct, which basically means you're all not going to be a bunch of jerks. I pasted a link to the agenda in chat. I'll do it again for those who just joined it if you want to add your names to it. Hippie very helpfully kind of rolled up action items from last time, so I figured I would roll us through that and then roll through the open discussion items after that. Before I get started, is there anybody who's new here who would like to introduce themselves?
You want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure.
Just let me unvideo you.
Hi, I'm Jeff Johnson. I'm just joining in here. I've been active in SIG cluster lifecycle, but I was just sort of in the neighborhood, and these guys were headed to this SIG meeting. I hadn't been here, so I wanted to say hi.
Hi, Jeff.
Hi, Jeff. Going to meetings for fun. Yes, you truly are a member of the community. Okay, let's talk about billing. So for some action items, Justin, you were supposed to have something about storage analysis for billing. I don't even know what the context is for that action item. Does that make any sense?
I intend to do it, but I don't think we have anything to analyze as of yet. So I will do it when we have something to analyze, right? Because as far as I know, we don't have anything yet.
We have single-digit dollars, probably. I'm trying to pull up the report.
Well,
right
I will then start, but as I was not aware we actually had anything to analyze. But this is about figuring out where we're spending money on our GCS buckets, I think.
Okay. So if I can back up at a high level, is there anybody here who can tell me how much money we have spent since our last meeting? Like, is there a report I could look at?
I have attached the regular billing report to the meeting notes. They are in the bottom of the meeting notes.
Okay.
Right before the open discussion section.
Okay. Billing report, March 6th. Gotcha. Okay, we spent a grand total of $35, though I don't know what on.
That's only for the first 6 days of March, right?
Yes, that is correct.
So our forecast for the month is $300 and something, $325.
Okay.
Let's see if we do a breakdown.
Yeah, because I feel like we had a breakdown.
Let me attach the billing report also after February with more details.
So here's a little bit more detail. $5 on DNS, $30 on compute engine, which I assume is you fiddling around with test clusters.
Yeah, I think so. Unless someone else is doing anything. Yes.
Yes. There's a test cluster right now with one node.
Okay.
No, but who knows what you were doing in the meantime?
True. Who knows?
I'm not paying attention to what you're doing.
Okay. So
I guess because
it sounds like we're still not really at a point where we have the granular level of billing we would want to kind of move a little bit more quickly, is what I'm hearing.
I mean, yeah, we have the data there. I haven't looked at the billing export and the Data Studio stuff to be able to produce what I just did without looking at the Cloud Console. But we have the data in the Cloud Console at least broken out by product, which is useful. It's a starting place. We need somebody to make the time to look at Data Studio and try to produce something more useful, which I think is going to be challenging until we have more than literally 2 billable items where one is disposable. So I'm okay to let this sort of sit. Once we turn on the cluster for real, or once we turn on the staging stuff, which I think we'll talk about in a little bit, then we'll have something more tangible to actually produce a report on.
Yep. Yeah, that's what I was getting at. I feel like that's kind of the impediment to, boy, wouldn't it be great if we could just spin up a couple clusters and run some things? Well, we don't really know how much that's costing us. Okay, so next thing in action item review is the image promoter. Is this what you were talking about with regard to the staging stuff, Tim?
Yep. Linus, do you want to talk?
Sure. Let me so yeah, we were kind of blocked on this, figuring out where to run the prow job. We had some discussions with Eric Feta. I think that was mostly internal, but basically we decided to just run it on the trusted prow cluster. This is like, apparently there's like one cluster, sorry, called trusted prow cluster, and that's the one that like has secrets and stuff. The reason we wanted to run it there is because we don't want to run in some other random cluster, or sorry, with the other like jobs that are not in the trusted cluster, because they are probably more susceptible to, I guess, malicious PRs and stuff like that. So my understanding is that there's already a pre-submit check for any new jobs that try to use a trusted cluster, like already in Prow somewhere. So that'll hopefully prevent people from adding like random jobs there using the secret that we will add. That's the secret to push to Kate's GCR prod.
So this came up briefly in the SIG testing meeting yesterday, and so I apologize if I'm missing context or should be responding to email threads. I know you pinged me on a couple, Linus, that I didn't get to. So essentially the trusted Prow cluster is where all of the Prow components run. That's the cluster where there's very little else that runs, so we have a couple secrets there. And so we're thinking, oh great, we'll put it there since that's where secrets already happen. But I was trying to understand, like, are there any technical reasons, are there any technical limitations that are preventing us from running the container image promoter on the same CNCF owned cluster that we're running the publishing bot? Because the publishing bot is an example of something that runs in the CNCF and uses some like trusted credentials to push some stuff out there.
Wait, who's running the publishing bot and where's that running?
It's running the test cluster.
It's running in your test cluster?
Yes.
So there was the disconnect that I was missing this week. So I didn't realize the test cluster was actually doing anything real, it being a test cluster and all.
I have a strategy, which is to bring up a second test cluster and try to move the workload, and then I will feel good about shutting down the first test cluster.
Okay.
Right.
I would not want to run, I would advocate that we do not run more in the test cluster until we're ready to not call it a test cluster.
Yeah,
I
I
did
think
raise the caveat that like this is intended to be temporary and destroyed, but maybe that's also a good idea because it forces us to like make this really easy to redeploy at the click of a button.
I agree. We need to have it scripted.
So that's why I was proposing to bring up a second test cluster with the approval of this group, and make sure like we can move the workloads across easily, and therefore we can like make tearing down these clusters and building them up very automated, very easy.
I think we're going to run into issues when we start doing anything that has volumes, which don't.
Tim's he's raising his hand.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
just to give some more context, going back a couple of things. So we do have a secret using Git crypt, and that actually publishes all kinds of from the staging repositories to actual repositories. So we already have, I mean, if we have a problem here, then we already have a problem. Right now, so there's three of us who have access to the secret. It's Stefan, myself, and Nikita.
Okay, so I have no real experience with Git crypt, but I'm not going to ask my questions about this right now. The real question I have is procedural. Do we want to try to shoehorn anything else into this test cluster, especially things that we depend on right now, or should we run with what we have until we're ready to say that this test cluster is not a test anymore? I obviously lean towards the latter.
Yeah, I'm fine either way, but I would leave it to you all to decide.
Well, I personally don't care.
See, we have to make a decision, right?
I mean, I'll throw my vote for what Tim just said. I mean, Yeah, it feels kind of weird because this job will be running like production jobs, so it just feels weird to say, yeah, it runs in the test cluster or the development cluster. Just doesn't feel right to me.
I would say we could put more jobs in that test cluster, but we should not put the image promoter in there in particular, just because it is so
Important.
sensitive and important.
Well, it's not important yet because it's not actually doing anything
Okay.
for real yet, right? Like I want to get it up somewhere like this week, although this week is perf time at Google, so maybe this week's a bad idea, but I want to get it up like this week or next week so that we can say, hey group, look, I made a Git change here, Prow kicked in and it moved the image from this repo to that repo. And that's all the plumbing.
Okay, so in the interest of moving forward, sounds like this group is okay if we run it in the same cluster we run the rest of our test infrastructure. I just had concerns that that was going to let us like accumulate more Google specific debt because it's possible there and it's not possible in the CNCF, but I agree in the interest of expediency, making sure we get our test clusters straightened out, we'll move forward that way.
Can we just agree to do the prod setup and come back to that after we've done the setup that just proves that it works?
Exactly. I think we can move Prow towards the front of the list of things that we try to move into the real cluster. And then we have to have the discussion about the secure Prow cluster versus the non-secure Prow cluster and what we're going to share and how we manage those secrets, which is good because we need to have that conversation anyway.
Okay, and billing is in front of that too, Prow.
And Prow will give us a substantial work item that we can actually look at billing for, right?
Yes. Okay, there are a couple other items under image promoter, like list of staging repos and groups who own them, Tim.
So we have a short list right now for the purposes of testing. Once, I mean, at some point, it doesn't have to be serialized, but at some point we need to decide what is the policy by which we create new ones and the policies by which we govern who gets access to push to those staging repos. I think we can be pretty liberal in that. They cost us very little, and the risk is fairly low, especially if we're actually paying attention to billing. So I think we should be fine to do that. We just should have some guidelines.
Just to confirm or summarize, so are we moving forward with making the project run in the test or trusted cluster, or are we saying that
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you for raising that in all of the places, Linus. And there's another item here about Tim setting up a GCR repo.
Before we go there, so Linus, what do you need from the people on this call? So by end of next week, that's the date that we are shooting for, right? So
yeah, I think that's reasonable. I mean, Tim already gave me the secrets to the registries or the GCRs that he set up, that he created. So I just need to insert them into the trusted cluster later when the PR is merged. I just need to make some changes. I'm already working with Feta on getting the details right for this. So I don't think I need anything else from this group.
Linus, can you give me a quick readout on the various issues that we filed against Promoter, specifically the pushing to 3 registries? Are we cool with that now?
Pushing to 3 registries. Yeah, so that is also in the works. There's an open PR for getting that to work without actually making more business logic changes to the promoter itself. That's like, creating a script to like say, oh yeah, just run it, that like dynamically create some new manifests, just swapping out the destination registries on the fly in a script. So
context. So for the recording context,
right.
The target repo, the prod repo, is actually regional. So we have one in US, one in Europe, one in Asia, and
Right.
we're going to promote to all 3.
Yes.
Rather than doing it the way we currently do it, which is we promote to one and then we copy to all the others via a separate mechanism. I think we can just promote to all 3.
Yeah, I mean the implementation details on that are, I guess, still kind of an open question because the reason why I say that is because is it John Johnson or somebody named John something at Google? He brought up Gcrane for copying just images like GCR wholesale. Like, apparently they can do that now. So there's like multiple ways to do this. So maybe
I think that tool is to back up. That's the other missing action item that we have here is we need a backup of the production registry.
Yes, I think that's
right.
what Gcrane is for.
Right, but like, because the regional like GCRs, they should be all identical, right? So it's
I think that should be part of the promoter. If you think about it, if you're pushing to one, it should be replicated to the two missing ones.
Right. I mean, I'm just throwing it out there as a.
Yeah, I mean, that's more or less what we do now. Is Zach Loafman wrote a script that does it, and I'm guessing they probably end up looking a lot alike. I think I agree with Javier. It makes sense to me to have the promoter be the thing that pushes to the prod repos, and then the promoter has no access to the backup repo, and that's done through a separate mechanism so that we can make sure that even if the promoter goes haywire, it can't nuke the backup.
It could have write-only access.
Okay. So I will capture that thought here in the notes, and I also add like a link to the relevant issues. Is that fine with this group?
Yes, I just want to make sure we don't lose track of it so that when we're ready to do our demonstration that it actually works.
Right. No, that's been on my mind.
And I would love to, just for setting a target, this meeting in 2 weeks to be able to have that demo.
Okay. Sounds good.
That seems reasonable. Also, for what it's worth, thank you, Linus, for doing the legal footwork necessary to get the repo transferred into the Kubernetes SIGs org. That was fun. I love lawyers. It's on recording. Okay, let's move on. Artifactory or artifact serving. Justin, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so this is about the work, I guess, that Brendan and I have been working on. I think 2 weeks ago, I mentioned sort of a first milestone that was a simpler first step than the full 302 service, which is essentially putting up GCS buckets, very similar to the image promoter, developing something similar to copy from a staging bucket to a prod bucket, and just putting a GCLB in front of the prod bucket so that we can sort of start to get data and understand latency, reachability, costs, those sort of things. I think I had circulated a doc 2 weeks ago, and I'm not entirely sure what the process is, but I put that as a PR against the CAP as a implementation details for milestone 0. If people are generally agreed with that, I would like to proceed and start making progress on this. I don't know, Brendan, I haven't heard from you about how you feel about it in particular and how others feel.
Yeah, I thought it was fine. Sorry, I didn't. I'll go else.
Cool, I agree. So we have these scripts that make GCR staging repos. You can probably copy it and just change a few of the details. If you actually look at the commit history of those scripts, they have some lifecycle management stuff, which doesn't really work for GCR, but it does work for GCS. Okay. So you can actually apply some lifecycle stuff to the staging repos and say, after 90 days, whatever's there is going to get deleted, those sorts of things.
That's a good idea to start with that, and then if people complain, then we can
always bump it up. Right?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, then we can start serving artifacts, and we'll have a more interesting billing report.
Yes.
Yay. Just out of curiosity, was that 90 days number based on anything or pulled out of the hat? Okay.
Pulled out of something.
9 minutes.
I noticed that all of our test results are apparently called against the same 90-day policy, and that feels like it's not super helpful when we're trying to go back and compare test artifacts from now to, say, 2 quarters ago. Sure. They all disappear.
So actually, the GCS policy language is pretty cool. So you can actually say, after 90 days, move it to the cheap storage, and then after 180 days or after 6 months, I guess it's 180 days, move it to or delete it at that point, right? So we have all sorts of options here. We should look at it and think about it. Unfortunately, we can't do it for GCR yet, but there's hopefully we'll be able to do that eventually.
And these are binaries, not test results, right? So
Yes, no, I'm sorry for the digression. Mine was a totally random question.
Yeah, no, I specifically think we should apply lifecycle policy in one direction to the staging repos so they don't end up wasting money. Anything that's not promoted from staging to prod within half a year probably won't be. The prod should probably have lifecycle in the other direction to do delete inhibition and those sorts of things to make sure that nobody can nuke it in less than a certain amount of time. Something like that. So we should think about the policies is what I'm saying.
Okay.
Okay. So Justin, sounds like we'll have that up and running by next meeting as well.
I would like to achieve that, and then I can also try to get some analysis of buckets spend.
Awesome.
That would be a busy goal, but yes.
Understandable. Okay, moving forward, Tim and Hippie, IAM auditing. Did we?
I totally fell off my radar, dude. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
What do I owe you? I owe you something, right? I owe you, I forget, remind me.
I think we're just looking for some pair time to go through and figure out how to provide those permissions for auditing in general, I think, and specifically being able to dump the IAM roles so that we can dump an ongoing, when there's a change, we do an IAM dump and update probably the K8s.io repo.
Okay. Does Friday work for you, or maybe we can do, tomorrow's my worst day for meetings. I hate intruding on your Saturdays.
It's okay. I'm keeping a pattern of 4 to 8 a.m. because I get up at 4 a.m. every day. So getting up at 4 a.m. on Saturday is fun. And my family doesn't get up till later. So let's do it on your Friday.
All right, cool. So let's do Friday morning. We'll fiddle with the IAM and essentially create a group for like auditors. Make sure that group has enough permission to be able to dump IAM, and then you can run with the script to do what you think is interesting.
I like it. Thanks, Tim.
Sounds good. Okay, next. So there's an item here about Firebase, but I'm wondering if this is, I know Ben has some stuff about Netlify that he wanted to discuss. Can somebody remind me why Firebase came up in the first place?
The cluster API folks were trying to use Firebase, and then they realized that David Watson had showed up, and we were talking about it here, trying to request CNCF to provide funds for Firebase, but then we realized that Netlify is fine, and the issue was closed in K8s.io.
Okay.
Yeah, and we can offer Netlify because we already have the Netlify funded account, so it's easier from all standpoints to use Netlify.
Firebase for documenting the cluster API specifically.
Right.
That was the request.
Yeah, got it. So I know you have a proposal here for us to discuss, Ben. Is this something we should run through now? Let's see.
Sure, it's not, I mean, the doc is a bit more in depth, but the proposal is pretty straightforward.
Okay. I think my main question here is Ihor, I hear you saying like, yes, the CNCF already has something going on with Netlify. What's unclear to me is whether we're asking for the CNCF to support this directly, or if somehow the GCP funds are being used for this, or like what the story is.
It doesn't cost anything more.
Okay.
Yeah,
cool.
like it doesn't cost anything for community. I don't know the exact bill and details about the CNCF agreement with Netlify, but we as the community, we can use Netlify as is. While Firebase requires an extra funding.
Okay. Is there anything infrastructure-wise this group needs to be aware of?
Well, it seems like this is kind of the clearinghouse for the community agreeing to host things for people. So it is not an expense, but there's still some semblance of that. And to go with this, we'll most likely want to set up the sites with one of our subdomains, like something.k8s.io.
Does it make sense to create a subdirectory under the K8s.io repo with just some documentation about so you want to host a doc site, here's how you do it, here's the groups you need to join, here's who's in charge of it?
Right. So that's the thing that also needs to be covered that I didn't finish yet, was that we really should have some kind of like Netlify administration team, in the sense that we have the GitHub team or the DNS team. As you can see in this, Netlify has teams, but for DNS ownership reasons, we pretty much just need to use a team anyhow. So we'll have to have a team that the docs team on Netlify will need to fulfill actually creating the sites. After that, you can manage basically all configuration from a file list checked into the source repo, but that initial setup will need to be fulfilled by someone, and we'll need docs for this.
Who's taking care of this right now, Ben?
Basically, there are a couple of SIG docs members that do this. And then I'm not sure if I have the right permission set yet, but I'm in the team and I've volunteered to help with that.
Right. The question here is, do we need to interject and insert ourselves, or let things?
I'm not sure. It needs formalization. Right now, you pretty much have to go like know the right people in SIG docs and talk to them. And so far, the two sites that they've set up besides the main site have been experiments. So we need to like make this a real repeatable thing.
Okay.
Are you volunteering for that, or are you volunteering to round the troops up to volunteer them?
A bit of both. I don't know exactly what the policy should be. I have some ideas, and I'm happy to help with all of it. I can definitely document like how it gets set up, and a bit of that's in here.
Right. So if we can at least do placeholders in the K8s.io repo saying this is the process we are following right now. Here is the people that you need to go talk to. We can point other people to the same resource, right?
Yeah, and Zachary Sarah from SIG Docs has been doing this as well, and I've been in discussion with them about this, and we've also gotten clarified, and now Ihor as well, that the CNCF is funding this account going forwards, and you basically pay by how many team members you want to be able to have access to sites. We pay for unlimited currently. So even if this team were to grow as big as we want, it doesn't change the price, and we don't use any other features that cost anything. So
this to me sounds like a Netlify sub-project under SIG docs, possibly under SIG contributor experience. And I don't think this group needs to be actively involved going forward. But if there's anything we need to do to unblock,
that sounds great to me. I've just been trying to make sure I get it circulated to everyone.
It may be that our only touch point is in allocating DNS names.
Right.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
Like we should say, like, this isn't the group, go over here to get your doc.
Yeah, sure. That's actually a great point. Having a doc in our repo that says this is not the doc you're looking for.
Right. Well, right. Again, in the guise of like, this is a working group, so technically we don't own code. Other SIGs own code. Who should own the
So
docs?
my suggestion was that we add a new template to Kubernetes org for requesting a site, in the same sense that you request other, like GitHub integration.
Okay. That may work. I feel like we can discuss that offline.
Okay.
TLS automation, Justin.
I have not done anything on this, but I will do something on this.
Well, we have Jeff Grafton spun it up for GCS Web this week, so we're now serving GCS Web over SSL. And the bump in the road for the main site is to move it from a service LB to an ingress, which isn't really that complicated, but it's going to take a little bit of effort. And will require a new IP address, which requires a cascade of changes.
Do we have to move it? It's not in CNCF infrastructure, though, is it?
What?
Google's cluster, I believe.
Oh yes, sorry, it's not in our production cluster yet, but in the new cluster, but it's in the classic cluster.
I dropped this on my radar. I'm not sure what actually was involved.
Yeah, I don't think you need to do anything. I think when we go to move from the classic to the next generation, this will just be part of the cluster setup. And thank you to James for helping Jeff get it all set up.
I moved a lot of notes around this in the open discussion and the redirection service, including the merged PR from Jeff.
Okay, sorry. So I'm not sure if I followed. Like, we basically have this running in the Google cluster. Hooray! Are we planning to move it over, or we're just?
We will as soon as there's a place to move it to.
Okay.
So I don't have the agenda up, but I'd like to make sure we touch on what's left to do on the production cluster work.
Yes. So that's the last item
Okay.
on the action items anyway. So we've migrated the publishing bot over, but yeah, what is left to do?
Confidence in it and isolation, and I think making it more repeatable. So that's why for the repeatable side, I suggested bringing up another cluster and shutting down the first cluster.
Yep, I agree with that.
That seems like a easy-ish way to
And this
do
is
it.
what we've been doing for all the staging stuff too, is just destroy the project and start over and recreate the whole world from scratch, and make sure that the scripts still work. So yeah, being able to just burn down the cluster and create a new one from script and make sure that it comes up with all of the appropriate infrastructure that's needed, then cool. And that at this point probably includes Cert Manager.
The publishing bot doesn't use. I mean, it will shortly involve Cert Manager.
Sure, I'm saying that as the script accumulates, like Cert Manager is not an app; it's infrastructure, right?
And I think confidence. I think the audit, the RBAC.
The RBAC audit will be good.
We need a similar audit for RBAC that we have for GCP.
The part that I want to play with that I haven't played with, two parts. One is the billing breakdown per namespace, which we have tools for, and the other is the RBAC to Google Groups, which we have support for, but I haven't played with personally.
Ooh, fancy.
Right, so that we can give RBAC access to different namespaces to different sub-teams and be confident that they can't step on each other. Reasonably confident.
I feel like that discussion was still maybe blocked behind, should we be using G Suite instead of public Google groups for that stuff?
I honestly hold no opinion on that. As part of the original setup of that, the idea was to not make that critical path on anything. It was really just for governance work. If steering wants to turn around on that, I don't care. But I don't think it actually matters here, because at the end of the day, what we're developing is a set of permissions that are granted to a group. I don't care what the name of the group is, right? And I can have multiple groups with the same set of permissions if I need to.
What is the, can you share the reason for why a G Suite versus a public Google group?
I cannot off the top of my head, and unfortunately the main proponent was, I believe, Christoph, who was making the case that it's just like easier and nicer from an administration perspective in general. But if we do
G Suite,
I have a thought about that. If we use the public Google groups for this, if you're needing to get a message or somebody's unavailable, you have this way to email that group, or we have a way to kind of publicly see that. In the same way that we're doing our audits for RBAC, and it'd also be nice to see who are in these groups. And I don't know if that's easier to do via G Suite or Google Group, but that's some thought.
I don't think that's any different. The thing that I know off the top of my head that's easier or possible in G Suite is you can have groups be part of groups, which you cannot do through the public Google Groups API. Hippie, I totally agree with you on transparency. I would love to have the source of truth for membership in the groups be a file in GitHub, which a bot would sync into Google Groups. I've never played with the Google Groups API either, so I have no idea how complicated what I'm asking for is.
Is there an API that can do this?
But there isn't for public Google groups, as far as I know.
Maybe that was the other one, yes.
So we could do it. Okay.
So Christoph's comment as of January 15th was, I'd like to consider, if we're moving anyways, to use our G Suite. The auditing of permissions, administrator recovery, etc., are way stronger there as opposed to public groups. It appears as though using groups in G Suite costs us nothing extra.
That's right.
I think we need somebody here who is a G Suite expert to make that case, though. And Christoph just stepped away from the community for a couple weeks, so I'm not sure what to say there. I like the GitOps model, but I think you should explore whether or not the APIs exist to allow you to do that with public Google groups. And if we find they don't, I think we have another item open about using G Suite anyway for SIGs and working groups to have a place for their docs to live so they don't disappear when random people delete their personal G Drive folders and stuff.
So I'm down for all that. I'm not going to block on it though. I think we need a volunteer to step up and drive that stuff because I think it's a significant effort, honestly. Like it's a whole new API to learn and to do Git syncing from. So maybe it's not huge, but it's not like I'm going to do it this afternoon. Justin
Trying not to volunteer. I'm trying not to volunteer.
I see him over there, like literally quivering. He wants to do it. He wants it. I think we need a volunteer. Until then, I think we should just proceed with the public groups and make do with those as best we can. So I'd like to, I don't know if 2 weeks from this is going to be enough time to have the cluster up. Once we get this staging stuff up, I'd like to stand on the gas on the cluster and make sure that we've got it actually working. It seems like the next big milestone. So I'm not going to say 2 weeks from today, but maybe 4 weeks from today, I'd like to have the cluster up. Does that seem fair, Justin?
The real cluster?
Yeah. Like I'm willing to put aside a day or two to sit and play with IAM permissions.
I think we should be mindful that we might make mistakes and we shouldn't say, oh, it's completely production ready. We move everything over.
So let's move easy. We'll move the easy stuff. We'll move GCS web. We'll move, the small stateless stuff. And if once we're confident in that, then we can start moving the bigger stuff.
That makes a ton of sense.
Yes, please don't try and move anything in like the next 3 weeks if you could. Okay, thanks. I don't want GCS web suddenly disappearing right in the middle of release and everybody wondering where all their test results went.
You're right, I forgot about that.
Let's move on again.
Just another random thought is like, I personally don't know if we settle, you're saying the cluster. I don't know if we settled on like the cluster for everything, especially since we were just, for example, talking about like a trusted Prow cluster versus Prow's build cluster. And
so Prow brings that interesting concern of trust domains here. I'd like to be able to, I want to assume for now that we can get a cluster in a trusted enough place that sort of within the family, we trust our own projects, which is all trusted code, to not destroy each other. I do not trust arbitrary PRs from random people who manage to get somebody to say okay to test, to not try to break out of their container. That will require, I think, separate clusters, and probably we want policy around how often those things get burned down, right?
Right. I get that. I think I was just trying to drive towards, have we made the decision that we're going to have like one cluster for all the services, or because I thought there was another idea of like each service maybe gets its own cluster.
I'd like to say we should start with one cluster, or maybe we start with 3 clusters and actually use Ingress's global capabilities to reduce latency, but that's a secondary effect.
Yeah, I think we've been working pretty hard on the idea that we would not have one cluster per workload.
Yes.
And I think we have acknowledged that there are places where that falls apart, like Prow.
Yeah.
We should start with a shared cluster and then move things out if it doesn't work out, right? That's another way to look at it.
Probably once we have the cluster up with 1 or 2 things actually working in it, we should just have a item by item consideration of, can anybody come up with a good reason why this should not run in a shared cluster?
Correct.
And I think we know that Prow and Trusted Prow might be 2 different clusters right off the bat.
Right.
Just another thought off the top of my head. I feel like we don't start talking about repeatability until n is greater than or equal to 3. Like if this is our second cluster, I want to make sure we're not falling prey to the second system effect. I'd feel a little bit more confident if we burned this next cluster down and created it from scratch again to know, yeah, for really reals, we've got this. But that's
I'm with you.
My opinion.
I'd like to be involved in the burn and tear down so we have more eyes on that process together.
Well, this is why it's super important that we script and publish all these things so that anybody can recreate it against any target. Yes, and I have an action item that I owe for backlog to script some of the DNS setup stuff, which I didn't do.
Okay.
Like if I wanted to burn, Justin's giving me the stink eye.
Do it.
The DNS?
Yeah.
No, not the initial zone setup. I don't think.
Okay.
If that gets looked at again, can we ensure that we can replace and create an arbitrary zone for setting up things from scratch so that anyone with an account can set up the infra?
Yeah, so that's on my backlog to circle back to and polish off. It's not super high on the backlog because it works right now, and there's a million other things that don't. So
and it's always harder because you have to set the NS records on another domain, which will never. Well, I guess it could be scripted.
Well, I mean, if we wanted to really, like, we can do tests by setting up a zone for any domain we want.
Yeah.
I can set up justinsb.com if I want to. I won't get any traffic, but I can set it up.
Well, if I redirect it to you.
Okay.
I
Slow but steady.
using .dev today's .dev domains these days.
Yeah, .dev seems to be the new cool kid, huh? I've resisted the urge to go off and register one.
Okay, I tried to drive us pretty hard through the agenda because I wasn't sure if there was stuff lurking in open discussion that we weren't going to get to. I feel like we covered everything in open discussion. Does anybody have anything they specifically want to talk about for the next 15 minutes? Okay. One thought or suggestion from me is, like, thank you so much, Hippie, for taking notes here and trying to keep up with multiple streams of consciousness. But I'm going to just go take a quick look at our project board. I feel like we're talking about items that are way more granular than what we have on the project board. And I would be a lot more sane if I had to run this meeting again, if like each of the things we talked about were issues on our project board. So I don't know if we have the wrong level of granularity or what, but it's just like, it's so much easier to track action items if they're GitHub issues that can be moved around. So if all of this stuff gets taken care of asynchronously, like we can see that it's just landed in the closed column, that sort of thing. I am not volunteering to be your project manager right now. I have enough that going on elsewhere. Just a suggestion.
Yeah, I just ran out of time. I was trying to collect all the thoughts here and then go through the board, and then the meeting started. So next time, I'm hoping that this process will flow through to the board before the meeting.
Okay. But just so like all of Linus's work to get the container image promoter up and running, I would view that as a single card, and we can just sort of track the progress of what's going on there. Looks like the board is set up so any org member can write to it or make changes. So Hippie, if you are saying you're volunteering for this, you are my bestie.
You got it.
Unsolicited peer feedback, man.
Does anybody have anything else?
Cool. All right. In 2 weeks, then we will have our promoter demo come hell or high water. And hopefully in 4 weeks, we'll have a cluster that we can show is running that we're proud to put our stamp of approval on.
Sounds good. Thank you.
That
Sounds
takes
great.
into the quarter.
See you all in 2 weeks.
Thanks all.
Thanks.
Hippie, I'll look for you on Slack on Friday morning, I guess, or Thursday afternoon.
Yep, Friday morning or your time.
All right. Thanks, man.